Hi everyone, so here is part 2 of your notes for pairs of lines and angles. Let's go ahead and get started. So, from our previous notes, we talked about these 4 angle relationships. Let's go ahead and let's see if we can identify the pairs of corresponding angles. So, for A, if we are looking for corresponding angles, from the previous notes, we know that they have to be on the same side of the parallel lines. In other words, if it's on the left side of line G, then there has to be another angle on the left side of line F. So we can already kind of figure out that, oh, we have angles 3 and 4 on the left side, and we also have angles 7 and 8. Now, trying to figure out which ones pair together, we now need to look at the transversal, the line that cuts 2 other lines. And those angles have to be on the same side of this transversal. So if I choose angle 3 is above the transversal. And so I have to pair it with angle 7, which is also above the transversal. So for corresponding angles, I have angle 3, and I also have angle 7 paired together. And then, of course, angle 4 then must also pair with angle 8. If you'd like, see if you could figure out the other 2 pairs of corresponding angles. All right, so here are your other 2 pairs of corresponding angles. They would be angle 2 and 6 and angle 1 and 5. Now, let's go ahead and let's take a look at our alternate interior angles. So alternate meaning on the opposite side or on different sides of the transversal. So if I choose an angle that is on one side of the transversal or on the top side here, the other angle has to be on the bottom side. The other thing I notice is that we have the word interior, which means on the inside of the parallel lines. So if I choose angle 2 needs to be paired up with angle 8. These are both interior angles, but they are on opposite sides of the transversal. So we have angle 2 and angle 8, and then we also have the other pair, angle 1 and angle 7. All right, and then we can go ahead and take a look at alternate exterior angles. So almost the same thing. We have to go ahead and take a look at angles that are on the different or opposite side of this transversal. But now they need to be on the outside, on the exterior of our parallel lines. So pairing them up, we have angle 3 and angle 5. And of course, we also then have angle 4 and angle 6. All right, now the last pair that we could possibly have, the last relationship that we could have with these parallel lines is consecutive interior angles. These angles are, of course, on the interior, on the inside, as their name says, but consecutive meaning together or on the same side of the transversal. So here's the transversal. 1 and 8 are on the same side, as well as 2 and 7. So let's go and write that down. So we have angle 1 and 8. And we also have angle 2 and angle 7. All right, so this is the first step in these example problems, is being able to identify all of these relationships. All right, now, after we are able to identify the relationships, then we're going to have to be able to remember or figure out whether those relationships are congruent or whether they are supplementary. Just as a reminder, the only relationship that is supplementary are or is consecutive angles. This is the only relationship where your angles add up to be 180 degrees. all of the other relationships, so alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles, as well as corresponding angles, all of these are congruent. In other words, they have the same measures between the two angles. All right, so we're going to go ahead and use this relationship or these relationships to figure out example 1. So the measures of 3 of the numbered angles are 120 degrees. They want us to identify the angles as well as to explain the reasoning. All right, so let me go ahead and let me label that 120 degree angle as angle 1 just to make it easier to refer to. And now I need to go through my relationships and see which other angles are also 120 degrees. Well, I can pick any of these. I can have alternate interior angles. Oh, but I can't, because 120 degrees, angle 1, is on the outside of my parallel lines. So in fact, I actually cannot use alternate interior angles due to the fact that angle 1 is an exterior angle. Well, then we know that we can have alternate exterior angles. And so if we take a look, angle 1 is on the top side of the transversal. Angle 8 is on the bottom. So these two angles are congruent. So I know then that the measure of angle 8 is 120 degrees, and this is because of alternate exterior angles, because they're congruent. All right, so that takes care of alternate exterior angles. Now we also know that corresponding angles can be congruent. So if I take a look, angle 1 and angle 5 are both on the same side of the line, of the parallel lines, and they are both on the top side of the transversal. So I know that the measure of angle 5 is also equal to 120 degrees. And again, this is because corresponding angles are congruent. All right, last but not least, there's actually one final relationship that allows angles to be congruent or tells us that angles are congruent. And it actually doesn't have anything to do with these parallel lines. And that's actually vertical angles. If you have angles, two angles that are across from each other and made by two intersecting lines, those two angles will also be congruent. So that tells us then that the measure of angle 4 is also 120 degrees because vertical angles are congruent. All right, so now that we figured out angles that were 120 degrees, let's see if you can try this one. Go ahead and pause the video and give it a try on your own. All right, go ahead and check over your answers. Now, the first thing that I did was to label angle 120 degrees as angle 1, just to make it easier to refer to. Now, I know that measure angle 1 is 120 degrees, and if I actually take a look at angle 3, or if you put measure angle 2, that works as well. But either way, measure angle 1 and 3, or angles 1 and 2, are a linear pair. So this means that they are supplementary, and so those two angles, 1 and 3, or 1 and 2, have to add up to be 180 degrees. So if angle 1 is 120, then that means that angle 3 and angle 2 must be 60 degrees. So that's how we came to this conclusion. And then after that, all we needed to do was figure out, well, which angle will pair up with angle 3 to be congruent. And of course, it shouldn't be any surprise to see that we use the exact same relationships from the previous problem. So I have alternate exterior angles, corresponding angles, as well as vertical angles. The only difference would be that if you started with the measure of angle 2 being 60 degrees, then your relationship between 2 and 6 would be corresponding angles, and your relationship between 2 and 7 would be alternate interior angles. But 2 and 3, angles 2 and 3 will still be vertical. All right, now that we have done our relationships or figured out our relationships, and we've also figured out the measurements based on those relationships, let's actually put them into practice. So for example 2, they want us to find the value of x. So if we take a look here, we have a measure, or we have an angle that's 115 degrees. I have angle 4, which we don't know what it is. And I also have an angle that measures x plus 5 degrees. Now, first thing I'm going to do, of course, again, is to just give my angles some names so that we can work with them. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call angle 115 degrees angle 5. And I'm going to call the angle down here x plus 5 angle 3, just to make it easier to refer to. All right, it doesn't really matter where you start, but immediately I notice that I have angle 4 and 5, and these are vertical angles. So angle 4 and angle 5 are vertical angles. That's the relationship that those two angles have. And because of this, I know then that angle 4 must be congruent to angle 5, because that's what we know about vertical angles. Their measures are equal, they are congruent. And so thanks to that, because measure angle 5 is 115 degrees, well, that means that the measure of angle 4 also has to be 115 degrees. So that takes care of the relationship between angle 4 and angle 5. Now I have to think about the relationship between angle 3 and angle 4. Now, they're both on the interior of my parallel lines, and they are on the same side of the transversal. This makes angle 3 and angle 4 consecutive interior angles. So let's make a note of that. Angle 3 and angle 4 are consecutive interior angles. Now, consecutive interior angles are the only relationship that is supplementary. So that means that angle 3 and angle 4 are supplementary. This means that if you add the two measures together, if I take the measure of angle 3 and I add it with the measure of angle 4, this should give me 180 degrees. And now that I have an equation, all I need to do is take what I know and substitute it in. So I can take measure angle 4 and replace it with 115 degrees. And I can take the measure of angle 3 here and replace it with x plus 5. So let's go ahead and do just that. Measure angle 3 is x plus 5 degrees. And the measure of angle 4 is 115 degrees. And together, they should equal 180. Now, all that's left to do is just regular algebra. I'm going to go ahead and subtract 115 on both sides. My 115s on the left side cancel out. I get x plus 5 is equal to 65. Subtracting 5 on both sides now, I am left with x is equal to 60. And double checking my problem, it says to find the value of x and not the measure of an angle, so that means we're good, and we can stop right here. All right, why don't you go ahead and pause the video here and give this a try on your own. Again, the key is to figure out the relationships between all of these angles first before beginning. All right, go ahead and check over your answers. So what I did again was I gave myself some names for these angles to make it easier to refer to. Angle 1 and 3 are alternate exterior angles, and that's what makes them congruent. And then I also know that angle 1 and 2 are a linear pair, which means that they are supplementary. And that's what allowed me to write this equation. Measure angle 1 plus measure angle 2 is equal to 180 degrees. And then all I have to do then is substitute. Measure angle 1 is 7x plus 9. And then measure angle 2 down here is 136 degrees, as we can see from the problem. And then double checking again to make sure that we finished solving the problem. It says to find the value of x. We got x down here, so that means we're good to go. All right, that's it. Thank you so much for watching.